Welcome to a new series. I'm mega excited to be here with my cousin Michael to start off this new series of shiurim on Pirkei Avot, focusing mainly on the parish of the Rambam. And we're going to start off with an introduction. First of all, I want to mention that this shiur is Le'ilui Nishmat Levy ben Moshe ve'Esther. That's my uncle Levy, which is Michael's father, and Elisheva Yael Bat Leah Levy. So over to Michael, who's going to speak a little bit about his late father.
Thank you very much, Rabbi. So we start this new series on Pirkei Avot, which is ethics of the father or chapters of the father, of fathers. And I wanted to particularly do this in the memory of my father, Levy ben Moshe, because he was a great example of what it is to be ethical, moral human being, and particularly, in life we are told that one of the purposes of our life is to emulate Hashem, and sometimes you can be daunted by such a task, because if God is kind of something that's abstract to you, and an abstract idea, how can you quantify what is the ways of Hashem? But when in life you have examples, my father used to make it his life's mission to emulate Hashem and walk in Darchei Hashem and walk in the ways of God. It's not difficult to understand what it is to emulate Hashem, because I just think of my father and his ways, analyze how he used to do things. He used to, like Avraham used to teach his household. What Hashem used to love Avraham because of the way he used to teach his household. My dad used to teach us all on Shabbos. He used to prepare lessons for us on philosophy, the week Sedra, and various other things. But it was all fully prepared and beautifully executed. And so it's not difficult to follow the whole concept of emulating Hashem, because I can just think of my dad as in his ways, and it's very, very easy.
It's amazing you said that, Michael. I mean, I'll tell you something that I've mentioned in several shiurim before, and that is from my youngest years. I remember being invited to your house. Like every other week, we would spend Shabbos together. It was such special memories. Yeah. How we used to sit around the Shabbos table, and I always remember your father, alav shalom, used to just come out with this Divrei Torah. And as a young child, I must have been maybe about 6-7 years old, listening to these Divrei Torah that resonated with me, even from such a young age, and thinking, I want this. I want to have this at my Shabbos. And it really switched me on to the power of Torah.
Yeah.
So, and also I remember discussing this with your brother Danny, that your father, alav shalom, always used to have what's it called, Ma'am Loez next to his bed.
That's exactly correct.
Remember
I was thinking about perhaps taking that on after Pirkei Avot. Yeah,
wow.
Of course I remember. He used to sit and read it very intently.
Yeah.
And he used to tell us how he enjoyed reading Ma'am Loez. He used to show us the book with great excitement.
Yeah.
To say, you look at this fantastic book I'm reading.
No, because I tell you why. Because I just, when later in life I discovered Ma'am Loez, and I became so fascinated with it. I remember that's when I shared it with your brother Danny, and he told me that's when my father used to read it every night.
Yes, he used to put it by his bed.
Yeah. So it just shows, what an influence it was on me. Even though he never expressed that to me, I could probably feel his enthusiasm for that sefer, and it ignited it in me.
Yeah.
So it's very poignant that you mention your father, because really all this that we're doing now is for sure. Your late father has a chelik in this. I've got no doubt. From my shiurim, from the fact that you are so enthused about Rambam and Pirkei Avot, for sure it's
well, there's many things coming up, like me learning Pirkei Avot. I think of my father in a lot of these situations, as we'll see, like making your household available to Chachamim, and making it. So anyway, let's begin, and because I'm very excited to delve into these together with you, Rav Mashiach.
That's a shame.
So Just as an introduction, very quickly, I want to go through Rambam, because Rambam will be the main commentator that we're focusing on, plus Bartanura and Rabbanu Yonah, and also Tosfot Yom Tov, if we can get that in as well. But just to give you, if anybody doesn't know about Rambam, a very quick history of this great scholar. So Rabbi Moses ben Maimon, commonly known as Maimonides, also referred to by the acronym Rambam, was a medieval Sephardic Jewish philosopher who became one of the most prolific and influential Torah scholars of the Middle Ages. In his time, he was also a preeminent astronomer and physician. He was born in Cordoba in Spain on Pesach Eve, 1138. He worked as a rabbi, physician and philosopher in Morocco and Egypt. He died in Egypt on December the 12th, 1204, and his body was taken to Tiberias and buried there. During his lifetime, most Jews greeted Maimonides' writings on Jewish law and ethics with acclaim and gratitude, even as far away as Iraq and Yemen. Yet, while Rambam rose to become the revered head of the Jewish community in Egypt, his writings also had vociferous critics, particularly in Spain. Nonetheless, he was posthumously acknowledged as amongst the foremost rabbinical decisors and philosophers in Jewish history, and his copious work comprises the cornerstone of Jewish scholarship. His 14-volume Mishnah Torah still carries significant canonical authority as a codification of the Talmudic law. He is sometimes known as the Hanesher HaGadol, the Great Eagle, in recognition of his outstanding status as a bona fide exponent of the oral Torah. And also, as we're studying the Mishnah, just to give you a background on what the Mishnah is. The Mishnah was published at the end of the 2nd century CE. The Mishnah is an edited record of the complex body of material known as oral law that was transmitted in the aftermath of the destruction of the Second Temple in year 70 CE. Rav Yehuda, the patriarch, also known as Rabbi Yehuda the Prince, and Yehuda Anasi, undertook to collect and edit a study edition of these halachot in order that the learning not vanish. Although the temple had been destroyed 130 years prior to its publication, in the world described by the Mishnah, the temple still exists and the laws that governed it are expressed in the present tense, while the Talmud, which is a compendium of the Mishnah and Gemara, which interprets and comments on the Mishnah, refers to the Bar Kokhba rebellion and the defeat by the Romans. The Mishnah itself ignores the events of the Roman occupation of the land of Israel. In this way, the Mishnah is a document that describes a line of sanctification in which the rituals of the temple are adapted for communal participation in a world that has no temple, which escapes the ups and downs of history. Perhaps I should give us a brief outline of what exactly Pirkei Avot is. So, Pirkei Avot, Ethics of Our Fathers. Atop Mount Sinai, over the course of 40 days and 40 nights, Hashem taught Moses the entire Torah. The Torah was a two-part study: the written Torah, transcribed in the 5 books of Moses, and later extended to include all the 24 books of the scriptures, and the oral Torah, a commentary on the written Torah. The oral Torah was orally transmitted from teacher to student for many generations. In the 2nd century CE, Rabbi Yehuda Anasi felt that the oral law would be forgotten unless it was transcribed. So he compiled the basics into a 6-part document called the Mishnah. Pirkei Avot, also spelt Pirkei Avot, which translated in English as Chapters of the Fathers, is a compilation of the ethical teachings and maxims from rabbinical Jewish tradition. It is part of a didactic Jewish ethical literature. Because of its contents, the name is sometimes given as Ethics of the Father. Pirkei Avot consists of the Mishnaic tractate of Avot plus 1 additional chapter. Avot is unique in that it is the only tractate of the Mishnah dealing solely with ethical and moral principles. There is little or no halacha found in Pirkei Avot. The Mishnah tractate of Avot consists of 5 chapters. It begins with an order of transmission of the oral tradition. Moses receives the Torah at Mount Sinai and then transmits it through various generations, including Joshua, the Zakanim, the Nevi'im, but not the Kohanim. And it finally arrives at the Great Assembly. It contains sayings attributed to many sages, which we will now see. So, to start, it starts, Moshe Kibel Torah Sinai. Moses received the Torah at Sinai. Umasara Yeshua, and transmitted it to Yeshua. Yeshua Zakanim, and from Yeshua to the elders, or Zakanim Leneviim, and from the Zakanim, the elders, to the prophets, or Neviim Masora Le'anshe Knesset Hagadola, and the prophets to the men of the great assembly. Hem omru shlosha devorim. They said three things. Havu matzunim badin, va'amidu talmidim harbe, v'yisu siag laTorah. They said, be patient in the administration of justice, raise many disciples and students, and make a fence around the Torah. So basically, this whole first Mishnah talks about the concept of Masurah, which is transmission, and the importance of transmission. Basically, we learn that there was a period in the Jewish history, that the whole religion was falling apart, and that a way had to be found to kind of formulate and establish a way of observance that would last throughout the centuries. And when you and we talk in this Mishnah about who passed to who, and the whole concept of Masurah. Firstly, I'd like to give Rambam's commentary on these few verses that make up the first Mishnah. So Rambam talks about the Moshe received the Torah at Mount Sinai. And so I quote Rambam, and he says, we have already explained the description of how the transmission happened in the introduction of our words in this essay. And so our intention here is only to explain the words of piety and ethics alone, to encourage the acquisition of certain virtues, the benefit from which is great. And we will also elaborate to warn about certain vices that bring much damage. And for the rest, I will only explain the words and some of the concepts, because their concepts are already clear, except for a few of them. So, Rambam also says about the three things that were said by the Anshe Knesset HaGadola. Firstly, be patient in the administration of justice. Be deliberate. Rambam says, be deliberate in judgment, that they should delay in reaching the verdict and not determine it quickly before they fully understand it, as it is possible that new matters will be revealed to their eyes that were not revealed at the beginning of their thoughts. And he also mentions about making a fence for the Torah. And make a fence for the Torah. They mean to say the decrees and ordinances that distance a man from sins. As he, may he be blessed, Hashem, stated in Leviticus, and you shall guard my guarding. And it was said in its explanation, make a guarding, a fence for his guarding. So that's Rambam's commentary. But let's look a little bit deeper into what exactly this Mishnah is talking about. So Moshe received the Torah. We know that he went twice up Har Sinai, stayed for 40 days and 40 nights. Received it, and the whole essence of this Mishnah is to describe the strength of passing it down, passing the Torah from Hashem to Yeshua. Yeshua then gave it to the Zakanim. Now, who were the Zakanim? The Zakanim were a collection of 70 elders, Moshe being the 71st. The Torah was taught to them, and then Yeshua, who was Moshe's best student, he was given the task of transmitting it to the next generation. So the Zakanim, he taught it to the Zakanim, and the Zakanim taught it to the Anshe Knesset HaGadola. The Anshe Knesset HaGadola was a organization of 120 rabbis and mentors.
I think you, from the Zakanim went to the Nevi'im.
Yeah.
The Nevi'im to the...
Yeah.
And remember that there was also a number of Nevi'im who were on the Anshe Knesset HaGadola.
Yeah.
Like Mordechai in the Purim story, and others around that time. I think even Malachi and the later prophets were on there as well.
Yeah. So Yoshua was accompanied by the Zakanim when Bnei Israel went into Eretz Israel. We also learn about this. There was also a parallel kind of Pirkei Avot called Avos de Rabbi Nosson, which is a slightly expanded version, like a Gemara of Pirkei Avot. But that's also that's not in this. We're not going to learn about that today. So, as you say, the Zakanim taught it to the Shoftim and the Nevi'im, and at the time, Shmuel HaNovi was one of these people that was involved in this, but he was more concerned with the establishment of a monarchy at that time. I think he requested that King Shaul take up the position. He was a reluctant king, but once Shaul HaMelech became king, he didn't really want to give it up. And obviously, as we hear later on, he had big problems with David HaMelech. He was his son-in-law. So the first Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. The Jewish people went into exile to Bavel, and then to Persia, exile to Persia, and then a kind of mini miracle happened where the Persian king instructed or allowed the Jews to go back to Jerusalem and build the Beis HaMikdash. So Ezra, who was the Kohen Gadol, and Nehemiah at the time returned to set up the Anshe Knesset HaGadola, which is this organization that was instructed. Their mission was to organize and retain, also organize and kind of promote this new established ways to maintain observances. Like, for example, they organized davening 3 times a day. They organized Monday and Thursday Torah readings. They organized various other things, and
they formulated the Amidah.
They formulated the Amidah, exactly. And so they were instrumental in creating basically the practical religion that we live by today, and it hasn't changed that much if you think about it. So let's look at some of these. Be patient in the administration of justice. Obviously, in this point, they were setting up the Anshe Knesset HaGadola. It was very important that they were very thorough in their building of this sort of organization.
Right. It sounds like when it says be patient. Be patient. It means don't be hasty. So to be hasty in judgment means you're not really listening to the case properly. You're just, correct, you're just saying, right, let's just rule. But you have to hear every side. You have to weigh it up. It's not something which can be decided on the fly.
Yeah. It seems that it was very important to record who the Torah was transmitted. So we'll see in Pirkei Avot, basically in this first perek, we talk of these certain individuals and pairs of individuals who give us. They're basically, it's like someone went and collected from each person or pairs of people their, in a nutshell, ultimate philosophy of life and Torah, and said, look, if you could use 30 words or less, give us your in a nutshell, philosophy of life. And it was based upon their lives. They had lived through what they talked about, the sayings that they give over the next 18 Mishnahs of this Perek are basically story of their lives and the resulting wisdom in their lives. So but the first thing we learn are these three things that they said. We'll talk about who they are. Be patient in the administration of justice, like you say. Take your time before rendering justice. It's very important. You're given a very important position in responsibility in the community, that you have to really go the extra mile to examine the case very thoroughly. The second point was raise many disciples. In other words, have as many disciples as possible, as many students as possible. And the third was make a fence around the Torah. So, for example, if we think of there's one story that I'd like to recount, which is it's in I forget which Gemara it's in, but basically there's a story that's told about Moshe Rabbanu being transported to Rabbi Akivas Beis Medrash and listening to him give a shir. And he said, and Moshe Rabbeinu was confused because he couldn't understand anything that was going on. It was so different from what he'd received in Mount Sinai. But God had reassured him, the very same Torah that I told to you, this is being transmitted by Rabbi Akiva in his time. This is the kind of evolved commentary on the Torah, but it's the very, very same thing. This is the whole idea of this transmission. Things change, and they don't change, but they're interpreted differently in each generation. And we're going to see how each generation had their own philosophy or examples of philosophy. So, another thing, it says in here, they said three things. We automatically assume that it's the Anshe Knesset HaGadola, which was the final organization mentioned here. It's mentioned Yoshua, he gave it to the elders to the prophets to the Anshe Knesset HaGadola. But these three things are said. But it's not, apparently, it's not exactly true that the men of the Great Assembly were the ones who said these three things. Apparently, what I've learned is that the first section of those three things, be patient in the administration of justice, was Moshe to Yehoshua to the elders, who he told them, be patient in the administration of justice. It was the elders to the prophets who said, raise many students. And it was the prophets to the Anshe Knesset HaGadola who were instructed to make a fence around the Torah. So each of their kind of attributes fit in nicely to these three separate things. Perhaps it wasn't just the Anshe Knesset HaGadola who said those three things, but it was these three separate ideas that were transmitted through the three types of generations. So
the Anshe Knesset HaGadola as a whole espoused all of these three tenets.
Yes. Yeah. So also in the second of the three sayings is raise many students. There was an important thing. There was two houses of study, which was Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. And they were both very different in their attitude towards the concept of raising many students or many disciples. Beis Shammai was more strict. Beis Shammai said, if the character of the person who comes and wants to learn with you is not up to scratch, you must send him away. Which was directly opposite to what Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel, there was a story of a student who came to both Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. He went to Beis Shammai first and said, please, I want you to teach me the Torah whilst hopping on one leg. And Beis Shammai said, get the hell out of here. We're not going to teach you. You're not the right character. You're not worthy of our education. And chased them away with a stick. He went then to Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel said, teach me the Torah on one leg. And Beis Hillel said, do unto others as you would have done unto yourself. And the rest is all commentary. And which was a very important saying. So Beis Hillel had the concept of teach everybody who comes to you, because you never know what characters will turn up at your doorstep. Sometimes the weakest student, when they come to you, turns out to be the strongest student. And also based on numbers, if you take more students into your house of study, you're more likely to discover like an uncut gem, which is very important. There was a big difference between these two houses of study. And yeah, so that's basically the first Mishnah, and look forward to next time when we talk about Shimon HaTzadik.
Fantastic, wonderful. Okay, so thanks for that introduction and the first Mishnah, and B'ezrat Hashem, we'll see you next time.